This is the third generation of Kohler Dexter urinal, made around the early 80s up until around circa 1999, despite the fact that the fourth gen has existed since at least 1998. Although the outer designs are carried over from the second generation, the interior is a completely different story. But let's have a look at it. As you can tell, the outer design is very similar to a second generation, but the inside is very different, as you can see. There's the trapway opening, kind of more rectangled off. It has an exposed siphon jet, and it kind of bears resemblance to a Kohler Freshman in a way. Now keep in mind the second generation had more of an arched trapway opening and had concealed siphon jets, while this one has an exposed one, as we just saw. And now tucked up in the back are the rim jets. As you can see, they're pretty buried up there, but they do exist. Let's take a look at a flush. I'll be completely honest, the flush really isn't anything interesting. It kind of reminds me of a second generation Allbrook in a way. Now, the flush itself is nothing really to write home about, but as you saw, the ball clearance actually seems to be pretty good. It actually covers the entire area, even down to the sides, which is kind of unexpected, honestly. Besides that, there really isn't much special to this urinal. Honestly, the flush is definitely probably the weakest part, but these do function alright, for the most part. Sometimes the siphons can be a little bit lackluster unless there's a lot of water usage, or really a lot of pressure. This one doesn't really have a whole lot of pressure, so it definitely seems a lot more weaker than most. But these do function fine overall. And that's pretty much it. There really isn't too much to talk about this urinal, and honestly, it really isn't anything too special, especially for its time period. But overall, it is an interesting redesign, but it definitely lags compared to its second generation a little bit. Or at least in my opinion. But let's see how it goes into the grading scale. Let's grade it. The design based on this urinal is pretty similar to that of the second generation, however the inside is altered. That much being said though, there really isn't much to really say here. It's very similar to the second generation and I'll give it a 6. I'm going to be honest, I am not the biggest fan of the flushing style here. It's basically kind of similar to the Freshman, but just lacks something. It just feels like a slightly weaker version of the Freshman, and I don't really care for it. Sure, the powerful flushes are alright, but in general, I really didn't care for the flush of this one. I give it a 5. However, the ball rinse is surprisingly pretty good. It covers most of the areas, and probably like maybe the slight issues is probably on the sides, but overall it seems to get everything perfectly fine, and I give it a 9. Overall, the effectiveness of this thing is alright. It's a pretty standard, small, siphonic urinal, and it works fairly well. However, this is probably one of those urinals where overpowering it is probably not the greatest ideal, and you also don't want to have too much of a flush length as well. These seem to work fine for the most part, maybe some slight splashing if it's overpowered, but overall, it's alright, I guess. I give it a 6. To put it simple, the overall value of this urinal is just basically the second generation, but completely altered and a bit lacking. It's honestly a lot different compared to the second generation. It has an exposed siphon jet. The flushing style is a lot different and more siphonic compared to the more somewhat blowout-esque siphonic style of the prior generation before this one. And honestly, I just didn't really care for this all that much. This is just one of those urinals that you see a good bit, and then the more you use it, and the more you kind of put up with it, it's just like, it's alright, but nothing really special. I mean, to be fair, it's far from the worst siphonic small urinal that's made, because there are so much worse out there. But still, it's a bit lacking for what it is, and honestly, I never really cared for this urinal all that much anymore. I give it a 6 at most, though. The final score of the 4th generation Kohler Dexter urinal is a 32 out of 50, which translates to a 64 out of 100. This is just one of those urinals, the more I see and more I put up with, it's just alright. This is one of those urinals I really liked back in the day, but the more I kind of see these and put up with these, it's like, nothing special. To be fair though, it's still a little bit better compared to some siphonic urinals of this size, but they're still also a lot better.